Have you ever noticed how spiritually hungry our world is? Maybe even how spiritually hungry you are. You know, that is just indicative of the age that we live in. With all of our wealth, all of our prosperity, with everything that we have, it seems the more we have, the more we need. You know, things were never meant to satisfy, and that's exactly why they don't. There was a man by the name of Andrew who did an incredibly spectacular thing, and we call it the Andrew Mission. He did something that I believe God is calling every one of us to do. Really, it is the Great Commission. Let me tell you about it in a message that I call the Andrew Mission. We find incredible words in John chapter 1, verse 40 to 42. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. You see, Andrew had a brother by the name of Peter. And the first thing that Andrew did, the very first thing as he discovered Jesus, is that he brought his brother Peter to Jesus. And that's what he calls every one of us to do. That's what God calls us to do, is as we discover Jesus, we are to call those who God already has wonderfully united us to and related us to. We simply say, this is what Jesus has done for us. And then we bring them into a great relationship with Jesus. Isn't that cool? That's what he calls every one of us to do. That's what I call the Andrew Mission. It's the first thing he did. Because you see, we have the bread of life to feed and the water of life to quench all this spiritual hunger. Because you see, there is an adversary, there's a serpent that comes to strike us and to whap us. It may come in the way of, I don't know, a relational problem, a problem financially. Oh, we have a lot of those, don't we? And there's all kinds of problems like reversals in our job, temptation, sexual temptation, or temptation on the job to cheat, not to pay your taxes. Whatever the thing is, the enemy comes to strike us. And those kinds of problems are all around us. Loneliness, hunger, spiritual hunger. The antidote to all of the venom of the enemy is exactly what Andrew did. So Jesus calls every one of us to do the same thing, the Andrew Mission, to tell those that we already know, God's already aligned us with friends and relatives, to call us to tell those people all about Jesus. And that's the Andrew Mission. It's the Great Commission. What's the Great Commission? In Matthew chapter 28 it says, "Go and tell those and make them disciples, causing them, letting them know and teaching them to obey." So this is what I believe the Word would tell us to do. Those who do what Andrew did, they display the highest kind of wisdom. In Proverbs 11 verse 30 it says, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he who wins souls is wise." This verse holds for us a threefold statement. Number one, we are called to produce fruit. It's the most natural thing in the world for a healthy tree to produce fruit. We are called to produce fruit. Secondly, the fruit is a tree of life. In other words, we're to be attractive. Now, I'm not talking about physical attraction, although there's nothing wrong with that. Someday I hope to be attractive. But we are all to be attractive. In other words, we're to be full of life and joy and liberty. So people want to be around us so they can begin to see the goodness of God. As we win souls, thirdly, we are displaying the true value of life. In other words, we display the highest kind of wisdom. Secondly, as we do what Andrew did, we're going to shine. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 3, "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." You know, all that stars do, they just reflect light. That's all a star does. And we get to have the opportunity to reflect the light of the world, the bright morning star. And that's what we do when we tell others about Jesus. Third, when we do what Andrew did, we are Christ trained into a new calling. Andrew and Peter, they were fishers of fish, Jesus called them to be fishers of men. We are called not to have our old calling of self, which is pleasure and power and fame and fortune. That's what our old calling was. God's calling us with a new kind of calling, and that is to follow after Him and follow Him quickly. And fourth and finally, those who do what Andrew did snatch men as brands from the fire. We find in Jude 23, snatch others from the fire and save them. Do you realize how good we have it, and yet how horrible of a fate others have it if they don't walk relationally with Jesus? That's why we have to snatch them from the flames, literally. A Christless eternity, not in heaven, but sadly, in hell. Now it says in the Word of God that our eternity is going to be in heaven if we call on Jesus. It also says in the Word of God, the punishment is going to also be hell for all of those who do not walk in the relationship with Jesus. Now that is sobering, but it's true. You know, years ago, hundreds of years ago, there were games called the Isthmian Games. They had all kinds of games, but the most popular was what they called the relay games. And in these relay games, they had torches. And they had all these men lined up with their torches. And then down the track, they had another row of men without torches. Further down, more men without torches, and further and further and further. And when the signal was given, they would go out with these torches and they'd run as fast as they could until they reached their man. Then they would give that light to the next one. Then they would do that again and again and again until the race was won. And with that in mind, the Greeks coined this phrase, let those who have the light pass it on. And my friend, here's the challenge. The Andrew mission is really the same thing that God calls us to. We have been given the light. So let those who have the light pass it on. You and I, we have been given the light. And Jesus is saying, let those who have the light pass it on. It is my prayer today that you and I, we have the light. Let's pass it on.